And Trump, after, as we saw in that clip from May of last year, after campaigning as a candidate of peace, admonishing Biden to engage in diplomacy rather than bombing Yemen, gets in office and picks up exactly where Biden left off.
So Aaron Maté, who I think is one of the best investigative independent journalists in the country, went on Judging Freedom, Andrew Napolitano's podcast, to talk about Trump's recent decision to bomb targets within Yemen and how this contradicts some of Trump's longstanding criticisms against the Biden administration. So let's take a look and let's react.
Why do you suppose President Trump ordered the bombing of the Houthis? What conceivable American military benefit was served by killing Yemen civilians?
It's for Israel. As I think Max Blumenthal pointed out on your show, this is entirely for Israel. Ansar Allah, the Houthis, are the only force in the world right now acting as a deterrent to Israeli aggression. They resumed targeting Israeli ships in response to Israel resuming its starvation siege of Gaza, which is a humanitarian intervention. And so the U.S., acting as Israel's enforcer, has decided to bomb Yemen as a result, acting on Israel's behalf, putting Israel first. And so that's the reason why Trump is bombing Yemen.
Well, is this to point a finger at Iran?
Well, they're doing that in the process. And yeah, there's a warning here to Iran, and Trump is saying we're going to hold Iran accountable for Ansar Allah's actions, even though there's no evidence that I've seen that Iran controls Ansar Allah. They've always acted autonomously. Yes, they've gotten some support for Iran, but not nearly to the extent that U.S. officials have claimed, I believe, as far as I know.
Yeah, Maté is right on the money here. The Houthis are one of the only governments in the world that have really tried to support the Palestinians in the midst of this war in Gaza, which, rightly is thought of as a genocide in many circles. This is probably kind of interesting too, because the Houthis kind of find themselves in a similar dynamic in some way. They themselves have been subject to a treacherous, deadly blockade on behalf of the Saudi-U.S. alliance. The U.S. has its naval ships blocking aid and food and supplies getting into Yemen, and they see that Israel's done this in Gaza for many years now, I think since 2007, right? So they sympathize with them naturally. So this really does seem to be done on behalf of the Israel lobby, kind of fulfilling promises to Miriam Adelson, who gave Trump $100 million, and the deeply embedded Israel lobby in general. He's right about Iran. And I've seen a lot of Trump supporters say, to stop war, you need to do some bombings. To make an omelet, you need to crack some eggs.
So this is Trump using the opportunity, again, on Israel's behalf, to saber rattle with Iran as well.
Here's Mike Waltz on a roll about the relationship between the Houthis and Iran. This is from last Sunday, so 5 days ago. Chris, cut number 4.
Iran needs to hear him loud and clear. It is completely unacceptable, and it will be stopped. The level of support that they've been providing the Houthis, just like they have Hezbollah, just like they have the militias in Iraq, Hamas, and others. The difference here is the Houthis have incredibly sophisticated air defenses, and they also have anti-shipping cruise missiles, drones, sea skimming types of attack drones, and other ballistic missiles even. They've launched dozens of attacks on multiple warships, dozens of attacks, over 175 on global commerce, sank multiple ships. I just think the American people need to understand what has happened here. The previous administration had a series of feckless responses. President Trump is coming in with overwhelming.
If they had feckless responses, Trump was wrong to criticize them, which he did on Tim Pool, saying, why the heck is Biden bombing Yemen? They don't pose a threat to the U.S. And it's just comical to view Yemen as a threat. In the recent, so-called attacks, no attack actually transpired. It does seem to be the case that the Houthis launched some drones and maybe even one ballistic missile at the Harry S. Truman naval vessel, which again is in a war theater blockading food and supplies getting into Yemen, but that none of the attacks actually worked. So say what you want about that, but the Houthis are not a threat to the United States, and kind of going to war with Yemen and escalating that war, I should say instead, is a bad decision that could cause a regional war to break out, which we already think is a possibility if Israel occupies parts of Syria.
Force. We will hold not only the Houthis accountable, but we're going to hold Iran, their backers, accountable as well. And if that means they're targeting ships that they have put in to help, their Iranian trainers, IRGC and others, that intelligence, other things that they have put in to help the Houthis attack the global economy, those targets will be on the table too.
So Colonel McGregor, Scott Ritter, Pepe Escobar, Alistair Crook are in agreement on the following. The Houthis have never attacked America or American shipping. So I think you're right. This is being done as a favor to Netanyahu.
That's my understanding as well. This is Trump fulfilling the desires of top donors like Miriam Adelson, acting not on behalf of America first, but Israel first. Netanyahu made the decision to blow up the ceasefire deal. Trump, despite that ceasefire deal being a major achievement for him, even before he took office, has decided to walk away from it as well, because again, it's Israel first. And that means also we have to expand this to Yemen, because they're standing in the way of Israel's blockade by interfering. And so therefore, this aggression extends to Yemen, and the criticism of Biden. Well, Biden bombed Yemen many times too, so I don't even know what they're talking about.
All right. So can you?
It's also hard for me to believe that Netanyahu doesn't, terminate the ceasefire by bombing and striking new targets in Gaza without running that by Trump, by the way, who appears to have been the architect of this ceasefire right on the eve of his election. And, the two are so intricately tied in terms of foreign policy in the Middle East. If Trump doesn't give the go-ahead for that, I don't know that it's possible. If you want to stab, Trump in the back, he is owned to an extent by the Israel lobby, but he has an ego too, and he wants accomplishments of being a peacemaker, I do think. But he's too controlled by the Israel lobby for that to be, I think, a possibility in the Middle East.
Do you have any explanation for why Trump would trash his own Witkoff negotiated, as you just pointed out, ceasefire agreement, for which, in my view, he quite properly took credit before he was even inaugurated, by authorizing Netanyahu to resume the slaughter in Gaza, and how he cannot be moved by the sight of 400 civilians slaughtered in 24 hours by the IDF, and the absence of any military advantage to that?
It's a great question. I don't know what's in these people's minds, but what we're seeing now, the carnage in Gaza, it's just unfathomable. The evil that Israel is guided by and the suffering and carnage that it causes. Well over 100 children have already been killed by Israel in its aggression so far in just a few days. That's exponentially more children than were killed on October 7th. And I don't know what can get these people to resume this bombardment of a besieged death camp where people are already living in absolute misery after Israel resumed the blockade, cutting off supplies for well over a week. It's just unspeakable. And by the way, one more point on Yemen, and I sent your producer Chris a clip if we have time to get it up. Trump during the campaign spoke very differently. He was on the Tim Pool show during the campaign back in May,
right,
where he talked about we don't have to always be resorting to war. And he specifically criticized Biden for bombing Yemen. And Trump said, you don't have to do that. You can pick up the phone and call these people. What happened to that Donald Trump? Where is he now? Because in the White
spoiler, he's owned by Israel. That's where he is.
White House, he's doing exactly what he criticized Biden for doing, which is just bombing Yemen and backing Israel as it carries out even more and far more damaging. indiscriminate bombing of the Gaza death camp.
Who is Adam Boehler? Is he a negotiator for Trump?
Until recently, he was Trump's hostage negotiator, and he got himself in a lot of trouble when he went on CNN and told Jake Tapper that he had met directly with Hamas. He called them nice guys. These are the Hamas officials, presumably in Doha, living in exile, and said, we made significant progress. And he said, not only are we close to a deal that will see all the hostages released, but he said, I'm very confident we can get a long-term truce that will see Hamas step down from power. And that outraged Netanyahu because, according to Netanyahu, you cannot negotiate with Hamas. They just have to be eradicated. You can't recognize that they're a party here. They just have to be destroyed, and Gaza along with it. Because if you have diplomacy with Hamas, that undercuts Netanyahu's goal of expelling Palestinians from Gaza and destroying their territory. So Netanyahu and the Israel lobby waged a campaign against Adam Boehler, and lo and behold, Trump obeyed, and he was gone.
And this is a tried and true tactic of tyrants and resistance efforts throughout history, not to legitimize the group that they could possibly make peace with, because just meeting with them and having discussions or peace discussions would be in a way legitimizing that government. And we actually saw that in the American War for Independence. King George III did not want to recognize the First Continental Congress as a legitimate, Congress or governmental entity in the United States. They say he didn't even read the Olive Branch Petition and the Declaration of Independence. I have a hard time believing he never read them, but officially that's what he had to claim. We saw the same thing with Abraham Lincoln, who didn't want to meet with Southern peace commissioners for fear that it might legitimize their ability to withdraw from the Union, which was integral to the formation of the American Union in the first place, withdrawing from Great Britain. So you see this time and time again. We're seeing it again now. Netanyahu does not want any diplomacy with Hamas, although he did fund Hamas and prop them up at a time to displace the potential for a Palestinian state. He doesn't want to have official agreements with them. He just wants them wiped out. He doesn't want them to have any air of legitimacy, especially internationally.
Adam Boehler made the mistake not only of advocating diplomacy with Hamas and saying it was productive, but also saying in the same interview that the U.S. is not an agent of Israel. We have our own interests. You can't say that in Washington, D.C., because that's just not how things work.
Chris just unearthed the Tim Pool clip with Trump.
Oh, wait do you see this?
I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is on fire.
I heard that.
And so ridiculous for him to condemn Biden for the same thing that he is now doing. If we need anything, it's for President Trump to listen to candidate Trump. That rhetoric is what people voted for. Of course, we don't always get the rhetoric put into, manifested policy.
Different the world looks from outside the White House looking in compared to inside the White House looking out. That's a 180-degree flip. I will play this Adam Boehler clip. Some of what he says is absurd, I think, about Israel having done a wonderful job to suppress Hamas, but it's a very interesting clip, which you also sent to us. Chris, number 17.
I do think there's hope. I think that Israel has done a wonderful, masterful job eliminating Hamas, Hezbollah, a number of other enemies in the state that makes things possible that weren't possible before. And I think you could see something like a long-term truce where we forgive prisoners, where Hamas lays down their arms, where they agree they're not part of the political party going forward. I think that's a reality. It's real close.
Contradicts himself. He says that Israel eliminated Hamas, but Hamas has to lay down its arms. But I can see why a statement like that would infuriate Netanyahu. Do you honestly think that it's because of the Zionist lobby that Trump said, okay, Bibi, resume the attacks inside Gaza, kill all the civilians you want?
Well, not just the lobby, but also this bipartisan commitment to Israel and Israeli aggression, because Israel is a proxy of the U.S. and serves U.S. goals of hegemony in the region. There's also the evangelical component here. That's a major factor. All these factors contribute to just unfettered support for Israeli aggression. As we saw in that clip from May of last year, after campaigning as a candidate of peace, admonishing Biden to engage in diplomacy rather than bombing Yemen, gets in office and picks up exactly where Biden left off, providing unequivocal support to Israeli aggression. And in the case of Gaza, destroying a tiny strip of land that is completely defenseless. There's no air defense there. There's no army. It's just people sheltering in tents and rubble. And that's why we're seeing so many horrific images of civilian carnage, so many dead kids, because that's who Israel is targeting with Trump support.
Aaron Maté is so on the money here. Really think that you guys should subscribe to Judging Freedom. He has him on there a lot. But the U.S. war machine knows no individual political party. They know no individual candidate. It's a bipartisan affair, and it's a costly and dangerous and destructive one. Has been my entire life. I'm 41 years old, and more or less with, several small interregnums in between, the U.S. has been at war. The same's true in the Middle East. He's right on the money when it comes to Israel as a proxy, really commands a lot of our foreign policy. And a lot of us knew it as soon as we could tell some of the people that Trump was appointing into this cabinet, the Rubios, the Mike Waltzes, the Elise Stefanik's, the Mike Huckabees of the world, the John Ratcliffes, we knew that this was going to be an ultra-Zionist administration. And so much of U.S. foreign policy is taken on behalf of Israel, and it hasn't done any of us any good. Now you see us fanning the flames for war with Iran, like J.D. Vance did at the Republican National Convention. It's just, such a treacherous kind of trajectory that we've been on this whole time. America first does not mean fighting the battles of other nations and subsidizing the military of other nations, but that's what we've just grown accustomed to. So, what do you guys think? Why would Trump give Netanyahu the go-ahead to resume hostilities in Gaza? Do you think it's as simple as, just being beholden to the Israel lobby? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.